Growth attenuation may be the most controversial medical treatment you've never heard of. The process usually involves giving high-dose estrogen to children in order to close their growth plates and keep them small for the rest of their life. Since it takes a few years to complete, this therapy is usually done to kids between the ages of 3 and 6.
Growth estrogen has been used to attenuate growth in children for a long time. It was used in the 50s for girls who were going through puberty and who were destined to be tall to make them not as tall. Which now we look at you've got to be kidding. But sure enough, that's what was done.
That's Dr. Benjamin Wilfond, a bioethicist and investigator at the Truman Katz Center for Pediatric Bioethics and Palliative Care at Seattle Children's Research Institute. While growth attenuation was originally used as a tool for beauty standards, its purpose became more significant in the early 2000s. Two parents approached doctors at Seattle Children's Hospital wanting to use this therapy on their daughter Ashley, who was born with a severe brain impairment and couldn't walk or talk.
The ethics committee got involved in this in 2004 and listened to this family and considered issues and made a recommendation about this, which acknowledged that this could be potentially done under certain circumstances. They felt that it would be ethical to do this.
From ages 3 to 6, Ashley underwent growth attenuation therapy, as well as a hysterectomy to avoid menstruation. Her breast buds were also removed so that she would never develop fully grown breasts. Her parents claimed that this would save her the discomfort that's often associated with female development. A paper was published in 2006 detailing Ashley's procedures. As you could imagine, it garnered a lot of attention and opinions. In response, Wilfond and a colleague decided to host a one-day symposium on the topic.
We heard from a lot of different people and their perspectives, and we had this idea that on the basis of this one-day public meeting, which we were very thoughtful about who we invited to give talks and things like that, as well as questions from the audience, we imagined that we would then be able to sit down and write a paper describing the issues and coming to some consensus. And there was a group of us who helped organize the conference. Make a long story short, the conference was fantastic, but no way did we come to any consensus.
Nearly 20 years later, growth attenuation continues to be a highly controversial topic. In preparation for this segment, our producer reached out to various disability organizations, all of which oppose this practice. David Carlson, Executive Director of Disability Rights Montana, says it may be the one thing the community can agree on.
The disability community is vast and diverse, includes people with HIV and cancer and intellectual disabilities and mental illness and mobility disabilities and sensory disabilities, and they rarely agree on anything. But this issue, I don't think I've ever met someone who identifies as having a disability who likes the idea of growth attenuation. And I think it's because one thing that is common is if you have a disability, you have a long history of having to fight with the people who are supposed to be the helpers, the doctors, the nurses, the lawyers. Everybody seems to think they know what's best for you. And growth attenuation seems to be the height of that, of other people deciding it'd be better if we changed your body than change the way the world works with relationship to your body.
However, there are also numerous parents online who post about how helpful this option has been to their family and their ability to care for their profoundly disabled child.
I deeply feel that it's critically important that we think very carefully about people with profound disabilities and provide the very best care for them. It troubles me that this intervention has been viewed by people who I think very highly of and care much about in a negative way, because I don't see it that way. And I really can see why parents might make this decision. And one of the biggest issues for many parents is not how will I care for my child as their child, but how will I care for them as an adult as I get older? And what happens when I'm no longer able to do that? And that is not an issue that we have solved, in my opinion, in a meaningful way in our society. And it's a very big gap.
Caregiving is the main argument in favor of growth attenuation therapy for kids with profound disabilities. In fact, Ashley's parents made part of their decision on the fact that she was about to grow out of the largest stroller they could find. However, Carlson says they failed to acknowledge the possibility of giving Ashley a wheelchair.
You aren't the first people to realize that strollers only go up to hold 75, 80 pounds, and that people get too long to sit in strollers their entire lives. But the solution is you use the equipment that is very often individually tailored to you, or take measurements and decide, okay, this is how it works. But that requires embracing a wheelchair. And that may be a bit too far. There was a comment back then made that, we don't want our home filled with medical equipment like lifts and wheelchairs. Okay, but like if my son comes home and says he wants to play football, I say, but I don't want my house filled with smelly football equipment. Like that is part of being a parent. Life changes. And yeah, maybe you don't want a lot of medical equipment around, but you know what? Your daughter needs it. So you get it.
Unfortunately, Carlson thinks part of the resistance to getting the child adequate equipment is not accepting the disability. Some parents may hope that by keeping their child small, it makes it look more quote-unquote normal for them to need assistance than if they looked like an adult.
I don't mean this in a harsh way, but there's an attempt to help your child be normal in some way. If a child needs help going to the bathroom, that's normal for a 2-year-old. So if I have a child that is more like that physically, regardless of mentally what's going on, and the world is growing and their experiences are growing, at least they aren't othered in this physical realm.
Which is an understandable line of thinking. Life is hard already, and it only gets more difficult if you don't fit society's set standard, both when trying to physically move through the world and constantly having to fight for people to see you as an equal. Carlson says it's often a battle for people with disabilities to embrace their own identity, so it's easy to see why parents would want to find any way to protect their kids from the world's scrutiny.
I haven't heard people with disabilities ever vilify parents who are considering this, but rather saying, I just don't think the parents get what we're seeing as people with various disabilities who have experienced some of these different things, have been in the rooms with doctors or with parents saying they would prefer a different route than I would go, really appreciating and understanding that the disability isn't the bad thing. It's how the world treats people who are outside of the realm of acceptable that is bad.
Ultimately, people on both sides of this debate are trying to find a solution. Carlson says the disconnect comes when the groups identify what the problem is.
They're just looking, I'm fixing a problem, but the problem isn't the person. So don't fix them. The problem is it's hard to get the services you need to live as independently as we would all want to. So let's work on that.
Thankfully, advocacy groups have been successfully working on increasing these types of programs, including funding and access to these opportunities. There are group homes and centers for independent living for people who need more support. But what Carlson believes is more effective is the at-home care available under Medicaid.
We can send the nurses' aides to your house. You can hire and fire them directly if you want, or you can use an agency if you want, that's fine. But there is money to pay for in-home care to help transfer out of bed in the morning, or help with hygiene tasks. If you can't raise your hands to comb your hair, they can help you comb your hair. You might be able to, once you get in your wheelchair, control it and move about the world completely independently, but you need help getting from bed to the chair. Someone else may need help with reminders not to run out into the street. So they don't need just someone in the morning to help them get out of bed. They need someone around them 24/7. That can be funded as well.
Though they may be hard to find, there's currently a broad network of community-based programs for people with profound disabilities. Carlson says by not utilizing these options and instead choosing growth attenuation therapy, we're feeding into the idea that the person needs to fit the service instead of the other way around.
We need people continuing to have our back and fighting to get these services in the community, not saying, if only we could have kept you small, it'd be easier to serve you. And it's like, it's not me that's hard to serve. It's the system making sure that we're funding and recruiting properly to get all needs met. Because the support needs are never going to go away. As long as the person is alive, those support needs are going to be there. So whether someone is 68 pounds or 268 pounds, you still need a human being there to deliver support.
Much of the infrastructure needed to care for people with disabilities is already in place. It's just geared towards a different demographic, the elderly. We've already created spaces and programs to aid fully grown adults with their needs. So why does the topic suddenly become abnormal when we apply the same care to people with disabilities? Why is the responsibility suddenly put on the human to change rather than adjusting the system?
this idea that in order to deliver good care, you have to keep the person small. It's like there are many people who are not small, who are big like me, and still need personal care needs met. So it's not necessary. It is only necessary if you're limiting your experiences to what you've seen before in your child's maturation.
Carlson believes growth attenuation places a distorted lens over the situation that can easily erase the disability experience. In other words, if someone is permanently small and childlike, you feel comfortable treating them as such, even when they're an adult. However, there are more factors that go into a parent's decision to move forward with this treatment, like protection from sexual abuse that's prevalent in this community. Join us next week as we continue to dissect the ethical debate on growth attenuation therapy. You can find more information about Dr. Benjamin Wilfond, David Carlson, and all of our guests on our website, radiohealthjournal.org. For more behind the scenes, follow Radio Health Journal on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Our writer-producer is Kristen Farah. Our executive producer is Amira Zaveri. I'm Elizabeth Westfield.